Good morning. Welcome to Changing Times. It is Wednesday, August the 16th, and we are live at the Axe Media Group headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. I tell you what, get your pencil and paper right now because this show is going to be one of the most important shows you've ever seen in your life. And it can definitely make a difference. And there's going to be a warning. I just want to let you know, warning you that this show is all about some warnings that our friend and guest, Larry Ballard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I tell you what, I'm anxious to hear this. Some people are going to doubt it. Some people are not going to believe it. Some people are going to be worried. But there's going to be good news at the end, and we're going to tell you that because we always want to make sure that our shows have good news. I'm Lynn Morris.
I'm Louis Michael, sitting in for Dawn Blackard again, and hopefully she'll be back one of these days soon.
Yeah,
we miss her face.
You know what? We pray that she'll be back, and at the same time, maybe I'll have you sit over here.
I may do that.
So we don't want you to leave either. So.
Hey, and I want to say today too. This is August 16th. That marks 46 years that Elvis Presley passed away. So
wow.
I was in Memphis this time last year at the candlelight vigil, and a lot of people miss Elvis. So
he is the best Elvis imitator there is, and you sound just like Elvis. And when you were young, you looked just like Elvis. And so
back when I could still fit in the jumpsuits.
Yeah, well, and your hair and your face and everything. So it's really good. Hey, but no, we're going to go ahead and get started. So this show, you know, this is going to be a maybe a 2 or 3 part show. Okay, we're going to keep adding things to this as we go on. But Larry is an author of Liberty Crusade. That's his first book, and then he's got another book at the publisher. Is that coming out pretty soon?
It'll be out probably in October.
You want to make sure you get that book. The Liberty Crusade will open your eyes and open your mind to what really is transpiring, what's already transpired, what's going to transpire. And this is all God-led, right, Larry?
Absolutely.
So just tell the audience real quick. You've already been on the show, I think, 2 or 3 times, but not for a while. And we got new people today. So very quickly, before we get into this warning, why did you write this book, and why are you doing this today?
When I was in college, way back in 1968, so do the math.
They had college back then?
They did.
Oh,
they did. And we had pencils instead of computers.
Right.
I mean, it was amazing. Anyway, I went out on a motorcycle ride in the Ozark Mountains, and I ran around a curve, and they had laid gravel and oil down, and I went straight, and the road went to the right, and I went over a cliff. It was unbelievable. My motorcycle arced up, landed in a pine tree. I hit a tree head on and was knocked unconscious. They found me 4 hours later. Well, during that time, I had an encounter with God, and I got a download. It was just like a computer was downloading into me. I saw everything from that point till now and slightly beyond, all the way up until we went into the tribulation. And God said, your assignment now, I'm calling you early. You will not take the message I'm giving you out to the world until your hair is salt and pepper, till we're on the brink, until it's an absolute emergency, because the power that I'm giving you, people won't want to hear your message. So now we're there, folks. So this is kind of like a 911 alarm signaling what I believe is imminently coming. And this show is a little unique because the slides that you're going to be seeing, each one of those slides are from another show that might have been a half an hour or an hour just on one slide. So I'm going to take you through a whole bunch of slides very fast, warning you about some very important things. And basically, as this first slide shows, the truth will set you free. So what we're trying to do is get you ready for something that might be happening soon. And if you're forewarned, you're forearmed. So the good news is what you're going to learn here will be beneficial to you as we get towards the end of this presentation.
And for the listeners and viewers out there today, one of the first shows you did a few months ago was just about a week or two prior to the first bank collapsing, when you came on our show and you said we're gonna have total bank collapse, which you're still saying that we are, but you know, we had 4 or 5 and they just kind of like dominoes, and it kind of stopped because of what the United States did, federal government, to protect everybody with all the money. Not done that before, but now you've got more insight from God. And so I just want people to know some of the things that we've heard Larry Ballard say and speak is exactly what has already happened. So this is a good warning. And so let's just go ahead. We've got great slides today, and we appreciate that.
Looks like we lost our technical person, so we don't have slides right now.
Okay. Well,
so what should be up should be a slide that just tells you what this is all about. It's roughly 50 ways that humanity is being enslaved. And what we're going to talk about first is war. And what I've got up, or hoped to have had up, was a slide that told you about the 8 principal wars that we've been in. And I'm going to run through them very quick. And then as we go into part 2 and part 3, we're going to spend a lot of time on each of these wars, understanding how they're a very significant control mechanism. So the first was the Revolutionary War. Why did we fight it? We fought it because we didn't want to be under King George's central bank. So what happened? We ostensibly won the war and got our nation, but before Washington was out of office, we were under King George's central bank because what? We had gone bankrupt fighting the war. Then the next war was the War of 1812. What happened there? Congress said, we're not going to renew that charter for the central bank. And England said, we're going to take you back to colonial status. And we had the War of 1812. So what happened? We, again, ostensibly won the war, but we had to sign the charter. And we were back under a central bank again, which meant we were under slavery, folks. It meant that every dollar that was printed was a fiat currency, and we had to pay interest to them. It was basically a loan. And then we get to the Civil War. And now America is emerging, and we're becoming 2 sort of different kind of nations. We've got the South, which is agrarian, and the North, which is we're on the slide on wars, which is now industrializing. And England said, we're going to take advantage of that. What we're going to do is we're going to try to split America in half, because if they become one unified nation, they will be so powerful that they will collapse every aristocracy in the world. And so they entered in, started that war, and they brought the French in and the Spanish in, trying to help them. And lo and behold, somebody who we see today as perhaps our enemy, which is Russia, steps in and said, if you guys get involved, we're coming in on the side of the North. But the final story there is, what happened is we won the war again, but at the end of that war, what happened? They killed Abraham Lincoln. And they said, we still are going to keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. But that gave us a break, a window. We had a 34-year period where we were not under a central bank because Lincoln had given us the greenback. We were out from under the central bank. So immediately, we built the Transcontinental Railroad. We got access to our natural resources. We laid a 50% tariff on England. And what did that do to the American people? They said, oh my God, we can't afford to buy English goods. So what did that do? That started intellectual property to be developed in the United States. And we became the innovators of the Industrial Revolution. And then on our 100th year centennial, we had a centennial that drew 9 million people from around the world, showing the marvels of the Industrial Revolution. And that became what is going to be the prototype for the new economic system that's coming after the collapse that we're going to talk about. It was a system where instead of enslaving people with fiat currency, we shared that technology. The radio, we had the railroads, we had the emerging stock market with the railroad and on automobiles and the radio, etc. We shared that technology in the world, and everyone was benefiting, and the whole standard of the whole world was rising. What was that going to do? That was going to make everybody on a semi-par level and reduce the probability of war. But that threatened England. So we came to World War I. And what did they do? They spent 24 years trying to figure out how to cause a war. England said, if they get this system of railroads done, our control of trade through the sea is done. So they orchestrated a war, and people said, wait a minute, they wouldn't do that. Well, think about it. They're an island. They knew that war would be fought on the mainland. And they basically knew that their wealth would be intact because they had a global network of colonies. So they started World War I, and I want you to think about this. They killed 15 million people to maintain control of trade. Then we go to World War II. World War II is a different story. That was basically brought on because they took Germany and so oppressed it that Hitler rose up. But we wanted to be in that war because we learned something from World War I. We learned that America, like England, was not going to be directly involved in that war. In other words, the war would be fought in Europe, not here. We would be loaning money to the European nations. We afterwards would be rebuilding the European nations. And so America stood to profit financially in an unbelievable way. We came out of that war as the undisputed economic leader of the world. So we wanted to get in that war in the worst way. So what happened is, this is one of those false flag events. What happened is Roosevelt said, I got an 8-step agenda to force Japan to attack us. So they would have battleships that would go into the war zone, hoping that they would attack us. And they cut off their steel, and they cut off their oil, etc. And then finally, here was the piece to resistance. They needed to give them a carrot. And so they wanted to bring the 7th Fleet into Hawaii, where it was in striking distance to Japan. So they approached the first admiral. He says, you never do that. You leave your oceans wide open. All your ships are out there. They can't be, destroyed. Second admiral said no. The third admiral said, okay, I want to be powerful. And they parked those ships, and we had the largest massacre that the American ever had. Over 3,000 men were killed in Pearl Harbor. Then we come to Vietnam, and now America's in a different situation. They're beginning to try to financially collapse us. And so the greatest military strategist in the world, Sun Tzu, says, no nation ever benefits from a prolonged war. You get in, you fight that war, and you end it. So what did we do? We went into Vietnam, and our people, Eisenhower knew, Kennedy knew, everybody knew that war was unwinnable. Yet we fought it. And what happened at the end of the war? We found out something called the Pentagon Papers. So we're basically dealing with control now. We found out that the war was a false flag event, that the attack that they talked about on the Haiphong Harbor never happened. We got into the war, and now all of a sudden the war protest has got such steam that we've got to get out. So what do they do? The military strategists for centuries have known, if you can cut the supply line of an enemy, the war's over. So what did Nixon do, folks? Think about it. He mined the harbor, and in a matter of weeks, it filled with soot, and the war was over. But look at all the men and women who were killed. Look at the money that was spent. That started to drive America into some real serious economic collapse. And then we go to 9/11, and this really is the kind of event that's precipitating this presentation today. I'm fearing another 9/11 type event. I have to tell you, I'm a devout Christian because of what happened to me in 1968. How could I be otherwise? So looking at this from a biblical viewpoint, I'm just putting some dots together. And what I see is that we're now at the Jubilee, the 50-year period where in the Jewish religion, basically debts are forgiven, a transfer of wealth occurs. Let's go back and basically a Jubilee is comprised of 7 Smitas, which are 7-year increments. And on the 50th year, the whole nation is supposed to not plant crops, and they're supposed to forgive all debts. We're in a Jubilee. When was 9/11? September 11th. The Jubilee year ends September 15th. So if I'm looking at the Bible, I'm not saying in ironclad terms this is going to happen, but I think we're coming up to a very important date that could signal, if I'm one of the bad guys, maybe I want to make a financial collapse occur in and around that biblical marker. So I'm believing that what happened a couple of months ago with the banking system, they put a Band-Aid on it to keep it in place until they get to the point that they want to pop it. Because every time we have a collapse, let's take 1929. What did they do in 1929? They increased the money supply 62%. They focused on investing in the stock market and radio and other emerging technologies. They allowed us to do something we'd never done before. We could buy stocks at 10% down. And then the global elite sat back and said, on this date, it was October, whatever, they pulled back all of the margin calls and collapsed the market. So I'm seeing the patterns that say they might be not only causing the collapse around this time frame, September, October, but if that threatens them, they might also be doing a 9/11 type event. Now, we've got something happening right now today. We've got massive fires over in Hawaii, and I try to stay away from anything I can't absolutely prove, but there's some emerging evidence that says that those fires might have started from controlled energy devices. So maybe that's one of our first false flag events. Moving on so we can really move into this thing. The last war was the Arab Spring, and that had significant consequences, folks. That was brought on because a League of African nations, they have a lot of gold in Africa, led by Libya, was trying to put together a gold-backed currency. The United States wants to control gold and oil. So they had to bring the Middle East down to stop that from happening. And what they also were able to do with that was a war that was different than any war we've ever fought. They put massive pressure on Syria and collapsed that government and sent 6 million Syrians into Europe. They're Muslims. They can have more than one wife. They have multiple children. And so here's what happened. If you know your history, there was an ongoing back and forth war between Christianity and Islam for 1,400 years. That war is going to be declared a victory by Islam within the next generation. Why? Because within the next generation, the demographic indications are that Europe will be a Muslim minority nation. And that means Sharia law will be voted in and Europe will have fallen. They're doing the same thing to us, folks, with our border incursion right now. So with that, we can go on to the next slide.
You mean a Muslim majority country?
Yes. So that's war. Now, why do they want to control us by war? Because war is the next step in their agenda. What that allows them to do is they break you financially, and then they put you under their central banking system. And there's a quote here from Vladimir Lenin, and he says, the establishment of a central bank is 90% of communizing a nation. And look at this slide, folks. The only major nation in the world that does not have a central bank is Russia. And people need to go and do some research on Russia. Russia is not what you think, and what's happening in Ukraine is not what you think. So the central bank is the nucleus that gives them the money that allows them to control us. So let's go to the next slide. And here's where we see they've now had the wars, they've got the money, and now they're going to take over our government and create their shadow government. And so this slide says the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and Trilateral Commission, TC, are committed to ending the sovereignty and birthing a one world government. So they want to end every sovereign nation in the world and control us from the shadows. And anybody who is in Washington who belongs to an organization that says it is our stated goal to collapse the United States of America and usher in a world war government is, by my definition, a traitor. So this slide, I'm not going to read it, but it's a who's who of who's in Washington. And you do not rise to the power ranks in Washington unless you belong to one of these traitorous organizations, which says we've lost our government. We are now a shadow government. Let's go to the next slide. And what does that give us? People are all upset because they say, well, the election was stolen, the last election, Trump got cheated, Biden came in. Folks, that's not the issue. Our government has been controlled from the shadows for over 100 years. We have a uniparty because that last slide contained Republicans and Democrats that had sold out. So we really need to dig deeper than that, and we need to go back at the foundation and get our country back. And we'll do that. Now I want you to understand the next step of how they gain more and more control over us. Here's the formula for making a nation great and the formula for breaking a nation. And I want to point out, Donald Trump understands that. That is exactly what he did when he came into office. And one of the things God told me, I will give you so much information that you will be able to see things that other people can't see. You'll have a 60,000 foot view that will allow you to take things that are complicated and make them simple. So here's how the world runs, folks. Basically, you control natural resources. You convert those into manufactured goods. Let's think of China. You control trade. Let's think of China and before that, let's think of Britain. And then what you do is you sell those manufactured goods, which creates money, and then you use that money to buy power and influence at every strata of society. Let's go to the next slide. This is the next one we're going to spend some time on, folks. So Sun Tzu comes back in, and Sun Tzu says, the greatest accomplishment in a war is to defeat your enemy without firing a single shot. And what do? They start 20 to 40 years in advance, and they start tearing the nation apart. So back in the 50s, we had apple pie. We believed in patriotism. America was in our soul and our fiber. We had our family. We had our Bible. We had Christianity. So they launched a full-fledged attack on all the things that made America great. And the communists said, if we can destroy those three things, America will fall from within. It will basically erode. And so the next thing, what do? Within that, they put a full-fledged attack on Christianity. They have tried to make everybody believe that Christianity is just worthless, that it is not something you can use to basically base your life's decisions on. A lie. What do they do next? This is all part of the propaganda stuff that has gone on for at least since the 1950s. They take our children, and what do? Projects Head Start. They get them earlier and earlier and earlier. And Stalin said, if you give me your children for 4 years, the seed that I plant will never be removed. And so they brainwashed our children. And then they finish the job up when they get them into college and they get them into the liberal professors. Then we go to the media. And at one point in time, we had, I think it was 86 different media outlets. Then in 1925, the Rothschild says, we got to get control over the media. They bought the 25 largest newspapers in the nation, took over the editorial staff, and began the brainwashing process. Now you see 6 up here. That's an illusion. We don't even have 6, folks, because here's the truth. All 6 of those media outlets run through Reuters, and Reuters is controlled by the global elite, by the Rothschilds. So basically, we have one political propaganda outlet that is censoring us, censoring Christians, censoring American patriotism. And then we go to the entertainment industry. And boy, those slides I'm going to show you next are going to blow your mind. We've been talking all along about how they control the world by controlling money, and they buy politicians. Let's go to the next slide. Moms and dads, pay attention. This is Disney, and this is just one industry. There are basically other companies out there doing this. We have a phallic symbol with Mickey Mouse. Look at what's happening on there. We've got anal pictures. We've got the Lion King sleeping and thinking of sex. We've got promotions for gays. We've got homosexuals. We've got drag queens. That, folks, is what they're presenting to your children. Those slides come on so fast you can't even hardly see them, but they are subliminally conditioning our people, our children, to make them into what they want to make them into, so that we will become Sodom and Gomorrah, and as we said, collapse from within. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I have to apologize, because I'm going to talk about the Catholic Church, and I know there's 1.2 billion Catholics out there that just might be offended at what I'm going to say, but I want you to open your mind, go back to the 1960s, and you'll see that there started to be an avalanche of instances coming out where priests were basically abusing children. So what I'm showing you is not new, it's fact, it's substantiated, and it's very real. The symbols in the middle of that slide are symbols that tell people who are involved what kind of pedophilia. I prefer a boy, I prefer a girl, I prefer someone young. And then if you look over to the right, that symbol, one of those symbols is on the lapel of the Pope. The Catholic Church is knee deep in sex trafficking. And then in the middle down below, you see the Capitol, and you see something out in front. She says, I didn't see that. That's not there. Well, this is a 3D printed image of Moloch, which is a demon. And they take those, they have several of them, and they plant them in Washington and capitals around the country and move them. But anytime there's a special event, that'll pop up for a few days. And that wouldn't happen if our government wasn't controlled by the shadow government of the financial elite. We would never allow that to happen. And then over to the far right, I think everybody knows what Epstein Island is about. So we're in the midst of child trafficking. So our children, our next generation has been taken over. And then I want to read you this. I usually don't read things on a slide, but this is alleged to have been from Barack Obama. It says, you just have to supply the nation's public square with enough raw sewage. You have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plan enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game is over. So we've gone through a 40 or 50 or 60-year period where this is what they've been directing us to, basically taking away our hope. And within the tenets of communism, one of the principal tenets says that you make your enemy passive by brainwashing them. So that's where we're at there. And we can skip through this next slide because we've really already talked about it. Those 6 media outlets are basically controlled by Reuters. And now we come to a pinnacle event in the United States of America. 1933, we were in the midst of the Depression, which started in 1929, and we've gone bankrupt. And here's what happened. When we became bankrupt, they were able to come in and they said in the Congressional Record of the United States of America, as of this date in 1933, the Republic no longer exists. All federal offices exist in name only. America is no longer a republic. It is a democracy, a socialist communist order. So think about it, folks. The Pledge of Allegiance. When do you ever hear us referred to as a republic? The Pledge of Allegiance says, I pledge allegiance to the United States and the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So a republic is a governmental system based upon the people and serving the people. It's we the people. A democracy is a system of government that is socialism. So we lost our government, and here's what they did. They had already ostensibly taken over our government, but now they had the opportunity to embed thousands of unelected bureaucrats into our government. And think about it, folks. Our legislators are not technical experts. They do not write these bills that enslave us. The bureaucrats write them. And then in many instances, let's take the stimulus, for example. Bureaucrats just, they write the bill, 2,000 pages on the stimulus, and they drop it on the desk. The politicians never read it and signed it. And what it did, if you go back and do your homework, folks, is it laid the legal groundwork for a dictatorship in the United States at the appropriate time. Let's go on to the next slide. Another pinnacle turning point in the history of the United States was our entrance into World War II. We instantaneously needed a spy network. So what happened is it just so happens that CFR that we talked about a minute ago happened to have a global spy network. And so that was embedded into our government and became the three-letter agencies, the Fed, the CIA, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense. And so now we see that those agencies are not working for the people, but against the people. We see that we don't have justice in this country. They have embedded their spy network in our government to spy against the American people and to bring us down. And so we go to the next slide. And now this takes us to the administration of Jimmy Carter. And they just said, now America is too powerful. We've got to collapse America. If we're going to move into this final stage of what we want to do, we have to have a completely new economic system. We can't have capitalism. It's too dangerous. It innovates, but it can't be controlled. So they embarked under Carter to basically decline the U.S., to take our trade away, which means to take our money away and to give it to China. And so I'm going to read this quote as well. It says, the Rockefeller file may be the most important story of our lifetime. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one world government combining what? Super capitalism and communism. I'm going to stop there. So what does that give them? That gives them the innovation of capitalism, i.e. America, the free market system, with the control of a dictatorship. That's what China is. That's why America has been forced into an economic decline while they have helped and done everything they could to build China up. So that's going to change a little bit, folks.
Very interesting stuff. We're going to take a brief pause real quick and hit our sponsors real quick.
We better do that. I tell you what, sponsors are what make our show go. And so our very first sponsor of the day is Brad Pistow. He is a certified fiduciary financial planner right in Ozark, Missouri. I actually use him. My family uses him. Several of my family members, Dawn Blackard, she uses them. Different family members use them. So I highly recommend this guy. If you call 417-581-9222, 417-581-9222, you'll get a very pleasant voice answering the phone, and Lisa will give you all kinds of information. They'll send it to you, no charge, and you'll get a book. You'll get at least one of his books. He wrote Safe Money Matters, and that was his first book, best-selling on Amazon for retirement planning. And then he also has a book that came out last December called Bulletproof, and that is also a best-selling retirement planning book. It's never too early to think about retiring, and so he's a guy to highly recommend. And so our second sponsor, Youngblood Motor Group. John Whittaker will be on the show on the last Wednesday of the month, and he'll be announcing a great, big, most important announcement on our show.
Big news.
Big news. And I'll tell you what, we're really proud of John Youngblood and John Whittaker. They sell Nissans and Kias. They have all new cars on one side of South Campbell and Springfield. They have over 150 certified cars on the other side. Those are the cars that they inspect all the way from the front to the back, side to side. And when you drive it off, you're going to know that you've got a car that's been certified, checked into. You're not going to have a whole bunch of expenses.
You can't miss that lot. It's
no.
right on the corner of Walnut Lawn and Campbell, isn't it?
Yeah, Walnut Lawn and Campbell. And honestly, 43 plus years in business, family owned. Not very many businesses can say that. And so
Great folks.
Great people. He's going to come on and talk about what you need to know about the car industry going into 24. So I think that's going to be good. And then our last sponsor is you, Louis Michael.
Hey.
Yeah. So what's your phone number?
It is 417-988-1086. If you need any real estate sold or purchased anywhere in the area, let me know. I'll be happy to help you. I sell commercial. We were just talking about that. I sell homes. If you need you want to know what your house is worth right now or your property, call me. It won't cost you a nickel. I'll be able to tell you what its value is right now today. And as you know, the market's changing all the time, and it's been changing the last several years. It's still a great time to buy a house. The interest rates are around 7%, but man, what's the worst case scenario? They'll go down and you'll refinance, but you don't want them to go any higher and buy in a couple of years when it could be higher.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Let me help you out where I can. And also choosing to live.
Choosing to live. That's it. That's a very important thing to you.
If you are suffering from any sort of PTSD, anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts or tendencies, please go to neversuicide.org. And there's a phone number there. My phone number, you can always call me to 417-988-1086. But there's a lot of great tools on the website to help you out and help you through your challenges. We're just here for you. We want you to live. So hang in there.
Right. Very good. I tell you what. And if you buy a home from Louis, he'll come and do an Elvis concert in your backyard. You won't know anybody when you buy that house. I bet you won't on that street.
I'm working on a building.
But he's going to really entertain all your neighbors. You're going to get to know all these people. Have them bring a lawn chair. You just make some cookies. They'll bring something to drink. And
the ticket to get in is a shovel or a rake and maybe some plants. We'll just have your yard all redecorated.
Yeah, it'd be great. Hey, well, thank you very much. Okay, let's get back. I tell you what,
very much.
This is extremely important. I hope people are comprehending what your warning that God has told you.
Yes.
And so just real quick, and I'm going to let you go back. So humanity, honestly, has been enslaved. And it's been a gradual process. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm hearing. And and I know it's been over about 100 years that they want to take the best parts of capitalism, they want to take communism, and they want to merge it together. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like I taught my kids, and I learned because I'm a science major when I went to pharmacy school. You know, you had a lot of kids have done that in school where you throw that frog in real hot water. That mm-hmm. frog, as soon as it touches the hot water, it's able to jump out before it even hits the bottom of that pot, and they jump out because it's so hot. But then you can take a same frog and put them in that pan of water and just start turning it up, and that frog will never jump out. And you can actually boil the frog to death because it's such a gradual thing. And honestly, that's what I see you're saying, Larry. I mean, this has been
great analogy.
A very, very slow process. So we're all been asleep, you know, mm-hmm. and we better wake up, right? And you better know what's going on.
That's why the first slide said, the truth will set you free. So with what Lynn said, maybe a punctuation back to how I came to write these. God basically, when I woke up from my near-death experiences, I want you to read the Bible, become a Bible scholar. You have to read history. So what makes my presentations different, the story that I have that's in Liberty Crusade, is I do something almost nobody else does. I combine the Bible, I combine history, and I combine current events to see trends, to see what they're doing to us over time, which allows me to gather enough information to make prognostications as to what's coming. And so what we've been doing is stopping every few years at what I consider to be a critical tipping point. And this next slide is just another one of those events. Okay. This is the formation in 1945 of the UN. And it is, again, controlled by the Rothschilds. They had tried twice previously to create a global governance body, and it hadn't been approved. But after World War II, the world was traumatized, and they promised this will keep us from ever having another war. Folks, one of the greatest lies ever made. The UN is basically where they they house their banking fraud. It's got the World Bank, it's got the International Monetary Fund, USAID, and then if you're going to control the world, you have to have global governance entities. So we have the World Bank. We also have the World Health Organization. And look what they've done to us since COVID. And then we've got World Trade. And we talked about how they've shifted trade from the U.S. to China. And that means they've given China the wealth to buy the power, to buy our politicians. And there are those who believe maybe Mr. Biden has been bought. I don't know. But then they have to go down to another level. Those are the people and the power brokers of the world. Then you have to have feet on the ground. And so there you have the media. We talked about how they've been taken over. You have the Fed, which controls our money. You have most of your major corporate CEOs are also members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You have academia, which is brainwashing our children. You have the unions, which are bought and paid for. And you have community organizers. And you have people there like Mr. Barack Obama, who was basically have a whole presentation on how from Wilson on, when we got the current Federal Reserve Bank, every president that we have had, with the exception of Kennedy and the exception of Trump and the exception of Reagan, were most likely found, groomed, financed, and placed in office. So again, folks, the focus is wrong. We're thinking we're losing elections. They back somebody on the right, they back somebody on the left, and most times, no matter who they put in, we've lost, we the people. So we have to have some radical changes. Let's go to the next slide. And now, this is where I'm going to scare you folks, but we're going to end with the good news. Okay. So their bottom line is this. Here's the lie behind global warming. They tell us that our carbon footprint is killing the planet. That's a lie. That's not happening. The real crisis is that we have a crisis of water. We have a water shortage because we've gone from 2 billion people when I was born to 8 billion people. The hydraulic cycle of the planet hasn't changed. We're still getting the same amount of water from the oceans. What's changed is we are now consuming 6 times more water to irrigate millions upon millions of acres of farmland. We're sucking our aquifers dry. And where we're at, we have the technology to fix this problem, folks, but they won't give it to us. We have the technology to make cost-effective desalination plants, put them on every continent and fill our aquifers. But they come at us in many, many different ways. So they came at us with a virus to kill millions of us. They want to have food shortages in order to starve to death, to create famine. And to do that, they have to control the water. So we're reaching a crisis where the water in the world and the aquifers is drying up. And if you look at that slide at the bottom center, you'll see all of that red. Those are all the places in the world where the aquifers are essentially dry or almost dry. That problem needs to be fixed. And what's their goal? According to the Georgia Guidestones, which blew up a short while ago, they want to reduce our population to 500 million. And Agenda 21, controlled by the UN, wants to reduce population to 1 billion. So their bottom line, just like Hitler had an extermination policy, they want to reduce global population to between 500 million and 1 billion. And why? Because they claim that we are consuming too many of their natural resources. They call us useless eaters, and they have to get rid of us. So the easiest plan they have to get control of the natural resources is to kill us off. And that's what you need to understand, folks. This should tell you that if they kill 15 million people in a war, it's nothing. But they're willing to kill 7 billion, and they consider it nothing more than a decimal point. So that's something.
So that's a significant warning.
Yes. And next, just think of the word coincidence. FDR said there's no such things in politics as a coincidence. So is it a coincidence that China now has 194,179 acres of U.S. Acreage? And is it any coincidence that Bill Gates, a globalist, owns 242 million acres? And is it any coincidence that food plants all over the place are being burnt down? Is it any coincidence that we're finding that we've got additives, crickets, and other things put in our food? And way back under the Obama administration, Halderman was his counsel, and he basically had written a book called Ecoscience in the 1970s. And here's what he said: we must reduce global population. And I am in favor of mass sterilization, unbeknownst to the people, as long as it does not affect the animals. So then we're moving over where they can control us and take all that food, that land away, and grow their products in aquaponic factories where they can control us completely and utterly. So if you can control energy, you can control money, you can control food, you control the people. So we need to know the leverage points that are being made against us. And now we're going to start to move into the good news, folks. You know what they want to do. You know how heinous it is. But is there any good news in there? So here's the question that I would ask you. If you've watched this, what would you conclude is the central lever of power that the global elite use? I'm going to give you the answer. It's money. Money. Now, God told me, look at what they've done and then understand, Sun Tzu again, if you know your enemy, if you got your spies in and you can understand that that's his central lever of power, take that away and that becomes his Achilles heel, his greatest weakness. So let's go to the next slide. So before I get into that, I want to take you just a little bit deeper into their end game. Not only do they want to kill us, but they still need a few of us. So we've got COVID, and what do we find out? That can genetically alter us. And look back, if for those of you who read to the book 1984, and they have the ability now to genetically alter us and make us passive workers, a worker class. And so basically, they want to basically take us, kill most of us, re-engineer the survivors, and they won't need very many of us because of AI and robotics. They'll be able to take the vast majority of jobs. So that's their end game, folks. They want to exterminate us and have just a few of us left, and the few that are left are basically absolute prisoners. And so basically we come to this next slide, and how do you achieve resource sustainability? In a nutshell, you kill us. That's it. You get rid of us. You don't need us anymore. So here's what's happening. I talked before about the Arab Spring. What you see here is a whole group of military-age men tearing down obstacles to get into this country. That, my friends, is an invasion. And if we go back in history, all the way back to Bush Sr., there was a secret meeting that happened that was designed to merge Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Just like they're trying to take over Europe, the goal is to take over the United States. Now, this next slide, pay attention, folks. This is their end game. They want to do that. It's right out of the Bible. In the Bible, in the book of Revelations, it says, there shall be 10 kings upon whose heads crowns have not been set, but shall serve with the Antichrist for 1 hour, a short period of time. The goal from the UN, I found that scripture in the Bible, and then God led me to the UN, is to create 10 servile trading blocks that have what? The power to see to it that we cannot buy or sell unless we give homage to the beast system. That's what they're doing, folks. Now, we're to the good news. So
we've got about a minute to wrap up. So
I'll be done. So basically, the bottom line is we take back control of our manufacturing, control of our trade, control of our natural resources, give us our money. And when the wealth transfer happens and multiple corporations collapse, multiple governments collapse, we buy back those things, and the Christian community, the free people of the world, take over, and we get our nations back and our governments back. And that's the good news, folks. And here's the warning of what I was signaling as to why I'm concerned about a collapse. We have an event coming up on the 22nd of this month where the BRICS nations are going to announce that they're going on a gold-backed system. That is likely to cause a financial collapse. It'll just basically bring our money back to us and collapse this. And when that happens, that's the trigger that's liable to cause these false flag events. So here we are. We're in the last slide. So what this is all about, folks, is I'm saying be warned. Potential financial collapse, be warned. Potential false flag event. And young men and women out there, do not go out and sign up to go to a war. We, the American people, have to stand up and say, we realize this is a false flag event. Wars are control mechanisms, and we're not going to give up our lives and our limbs for a group of global elite who want nothing more than to exterminate us.
Great job, Larry.
Yeah, I tell you what, so much information in 45 minutes. I hope you all have enjoyed this as far as being very informative and thought provoking. And we'll have Larry back on in September, and got two great shows coming up. Next week we'll have a pastor from Ballard, Missouri, that's doing a Jesus Revolution down at Table Rock Lake. Just hundreds and hundreds of baptisms, and it's just going to be so exciting in the first week of September, just before Labor Day. And then the next week we'll have John Whittaker on with Young Blood Motor Group, and so just a great group of shows. Larry, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're a difference maker. You're a difference maker, like Don Blacker says. You're being the change. I hope you learned something. I hope you continue to pray and be a Christian. That's the answer right now. Accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You'll be a lot better off, and you'll have peace and security.
Amen.
Have a good day.
Here's to live.
From a patriot like me. Can I get an amen?